Hello everybody, here we are. We're looking at the free response section for our practice exam, section 2 part A. And for this one, it's free response question 1. It says consider the function f of x equals the square root of x minus 3 and g of x equals the quantity of f of x squared. Which is the function f of x squared, right? So basically, if you look at it, this is something we're familiar with here. This is, just the square root function shifted down 3. And then g of x is just f squared, right? Use these two functions to answer each of the questions below. So these questions here are using these two here. So the first part we're going to find is f of 4. It means we're going to first write f of x, so we're just going to basically plug in 4. So we first write f of x, f of blank equals this. So if you notice, this is f of x here, right? So we're going to do the same thing, only we're going to leave it blank this time. And we're going to put in a 4. So when you find this here, you're going to simplify this. So this is, so f of 4 is, the square root of 4 is 2 minus 3, so that's just negative 1. So just to clarify, I'm going to write it over here. F of 4 is just negative 1. I'm going to box this in. So I have found this one here. So if you notice, there's a little scoring guide here. It says here this is worth 10 points, and it's plus 5 for each correct answer. So it's plus 5 here. Now I need to find g of 4. So g of 4, if you look at it, g is this function here. So g of x is just the quantity of f of x squared. So I mean, these brackets is just like another version of parentheses, basically. So you just do the same thing we did the last time around. And you plug in a 4, like I did over here. So g of 4 is the quantity of f of 4 squared. And you know what f of 4 is. What is f of 4? Well, we found that over here. F of 4 is just negative 1. So you just plug. So this is just equal to negative 1. So we rewrite this as g of 4 equals negative 1 squared. And clearly negative 1 squared is just 1. So g of 4 is negative 1. So you would get both of those correct here. Part B. It says make a sketch of f and g below, and use your sketch to determine the difference in the domain between f and g. And we have to, so there's a few things, so there's a few parts here. We have to sketch f and g here. So I'm going to call this f and this is g. And we have to discuss the difference in the domain, and then we have to discuss how squaring it modifies the domain and the range. So we're first going to do this with f here. So if you notice, f is this one. So f of x equals the square root of x minus 3. And g of x here is this one squared. So if we note f of x, what is that? So this, we all know the square root of x is over here. It's this one over here. It's centered at the origin. This graph, it's like the punch, and it kind of punches outwards. And we're just going to shift it down 3. So we're going to go negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So it starts here, and you just draw a graph kind of like going out like this, right? So this is f of x. And we're going to find the domain of this one. The domain is going from, whoop, put this over here. So it starts over here at negative 3, and now our domain goes from left to right, so it starts at here, and the x value here is 0, and it moves on to infinity. So the domain is from 0 to infinity here. And because in this question it asks us to talk about the difference between its domain and range, I'm also just going to find the range really quick here. The range of this function is going to be from bottom to top, right? So if I go from bottom, the first thing I hit is negative 3, and I continue on until I go to hit the top. This is an arrow, which means it's going to be infinity. So the domain is 0 to infinity, the range is negative 3 to infinity. So I've finished this piece. Now I'm going to move on to g. Now, if you remember, g of x is just f of x squared, which means it's the same thing as the square root of x minus 3 squared, right? So if you remember what squaring does, when you square a function, what it does is it changes the graph by reflecting this over the x-axis and kind of curving it too. So if you notice, it hits here. We don't know exactly where that is, but we don't need to know exactly, because the key thing is it is a sketch. So it doesn't have to be perfect. So that means it's going to flip up here. It's going to kind of go maybe like down like this, and it's going to probably bounce off like that. So this is the graph of g of x here. So we're going to look at the domain and range now of this function here. And remember, the key is this is a sketch. So it doesn't have to be perfect. The only thing that we need to get values for are for the domain and the range of the function. And we'll see if we need to find this value or this value up here. I think this value is 9. Well, I'm not sure, but we'll check it out. So let's find the domain. The domain is from left to right. So notice over here, it's going to hit up here somewhere. We don't know where. I'm guessing it's 9. Let's check. But the domain goes from here to here, and the domain is the x, and the x value here is 0. So it goes from here to here. So it's going to be from 0 to the arrow, which means infinity. So the domain is from 0 to infinity. And so you can see it's the same as f of x, and the range does change. The range does change. It's no longer at -3 here. The range starts at this y value. I mean, the range is the y, and the y value here is 0, right? And you go up here. Now this is where you might be confused here. You see how I drew it? Now you might think that the highest point is 9, but it's not actually true. This arrow is a representation here. You know, I could have easily drawn over here this to be 9, right? The point is, when you see an arrow like this, it means that this arrow keeps going on, i.e., the range is 0 to infinity, and it hits 0 to infinity. Okay. By the way, if you're curious how I got 9, I just squared -3, and I got 9. So now we're going to talk about, so notice over here, I've answered this part. If you look at here, it says +5 for each correct sketch, so I've done that. Discuss the difference between the domain of f and g. So the domain, so let's write the domain of f and g are, if you notice here, they're the same. We could say they are unchanged. All I want you to do is talk about it. How are they the same? How are they different? Okay? And now we need to discuss how squaring modified the domain and the range here. So we already talked about the domain, so now we need to talk about the range. So we could say squaring f of x changed the range from -3 to infinity to, if you can see, it changed from -3 to infinity to 0 to infinity. Okay. You could also say the range changed because when you square a function, all negative values we want to say all negative values basically go away, and the lowest point will be 0, right? So if you can see here, what this means is when I squared this, all the negative values are gone, and the lowest point is going to be the y value of 0, which is, so this part here is, so this is talking about the domain, here's range. This is another option for the range if you like that one better. Basically you just need to talk about the two, and this is what the scoring guide here is, +5 for discussing how squaring changes the domain, +5 to discuss how the squaring changes the range. That's what we're looking for here. And this is an idea of how you would solve this problem to get your full point value on this one over here.